All right, today we're going to be talking about how stopping binge eating leads to weight loss. Okay, this is a question that I got from an email from someone this past week. They gave a long story about how they really liked some of these concepts about listening mindfully and eating food nutritiously and listening to how nutrition feels in their body and so forth. But then their last question, I could tell this is why they emailed me, that right at the end they said, but I don't understand how stopping binge eating leads to weight loss, about how this whole eating intuitively thing leads to weight loss. And so that's what this video is about. I'm going to zero in on the scarcity. I'm going to just answer big picture right now. Scarcity is what leads to binge eating. And binge eating, if you think about it, it can be 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 calories. If you binge eat and you eat that many calories, that's like 5 days of eating. So it's just impossible to lose weight if you're trying to binge at this, if you are binging at the same time. And what most people do wrong is that they try to lose weight and stop binge eating at the same time. And so this video is going to look at how you can stop binge eating. And if you can stop binge eating, then there's kind of like a stability period where you start to re-regulate, you start to reattune to your body, and you're able to listen to more of your body signals. And if you're able to stabilize, then the third step is where you can then start to really notice how healthy foods actually do taste better, how they actually do make you feel better. But first, please do not try to lose weight when you are stopping binge eating, okay? And don't really ever try to lose weight, okay? Like, let it happen as a byproduct, but especially in the beginning, which is what we're gonna be diving into today. Your main goal, if you're binge eating or compulsive eating or stress eating, your main goal is to stop and figure out and understand the mechanisms, the food mechanisms that are basically forcing you to overeat. And we're gonna dive in those today. If you do like this podcast or this video, go ahead and leave it a thumbs up. Please leave a comment. I love engaging with you. So just, I'm here. Stay involved. There's going to be an exercise at the end of the video for you to apply, so I'd love for you to try that out as well. So binge eating comes from scarcity. You know, if you are starving, that you'll eat a ton of food. You know that. You know that, right? But did you know about mental scarcity or emotional scarcity? This is an equally, if not more powerful form of scarcity that most people don't understand. And this is why there's so much confusion and fear around stopping binge eating. Mental scarcity, this is an extremely, there's a lot I could say about it, but mental scarcity is where a certain food is not available. Let's say you're on a keto diet, so carbs are not available. Well, guess what happens when your brain is not allowed, is when your body and brain and stomach are not allowed to have carbs. This weird thing happens that never gets talked about. But scarcity, right? It becomes more valuable. Something that's rare and scarce actually becomes more valuable. And there are studies that show that this neuropeptide Y gets released in your brain, and that basically impacts the brain centers that evaluate food. And so neuropeptide Y, it will boost the perception of the value of carbs or whatever food you're restricting. So normally, if you had been eating carbs, you might just see a piece of bread as like, oh, that's just a piece of bread. But if you aren't eating bread and it's scarce, neuropeptide Y will go into your brain so that you literally see bread. Like, this is not you thinking, this is how you perceive bread. Bread will seem, oh my God, it's amazing. Like, bread, I must have bread. You get these cravings, irresistible. And you will not resist these cravings because your stomach will overpower you to eat these. Has that ever happened to you? Do you ever wonder why you get out of control? Well, it's because certain foods are scarce. And there are two scientific effects, actually. It's part of the dietary restraint theory. So dietary restraint theory, the biggest one, the effect I want to focus on right now is called Last Supper effect. And this is when you are about to go on a diet or when you are giving up a food and you're binging, and in the back of your head, and there's this like feeling like, oh, this is my last chance to eat. This is my last chance to eat all this ice cream or eat all these carbs. This is my last. There's this feeling of panic. And that's called Last Supper. And what's going on there is actually your brain is anticipating scarcity. So your brain is anticipating that the next day, when you wake up the next day, you will say to yourself, never again will I have carbs. Never again will I have pizza or whatever you binged on. So basically, you'll get into a mode of scarcity where you aren't eating pizza or ice cream or whatever. You're not eating something. The food becomes very scarce, very rare, and therefore very valuable. Do you follow me so far? You know that feeling when something is rare, you want it more. It's like dating, right? The person who's not available, you want them more. So same thing with food. When something's not available, we want it more. And we can be good, quote unquote, for a little bit of time, maybe a week or two, or oftentimes less than that, let's be real. But you can be good for a certain amount of time, but eventually something happens, and something always happens. It's called a restraint break. You are tired, you're stressed out, for some reason, you have more calories, like maybe it's just even 100 more calories than you think you should have. Maybe you said you wouldn't have chocolate, but you have a little bite of chocolate, and you feel like a failure. Or you feel, somehow you break, your willpower breaks, and this is to be expected, but in a realistic way, it's to be expected, but when you're in this mentality, you aren't expecting this. And so you break, and during this break, remember, your brain is thinking Last Supper. This is subconscious, this is at a gut level. The Last Supper, it's like you're gonna die the next day. This is named after death row inmates where they have that Last Supper right before they die. Well, your brain sees this break in your willpower as its only chance to eat this rare and restricted food. So it goes for it, and you don't give a shit. You just eat all this food, rah, rah, rah. You eat uncontrollably. This is your subconscious gut, your subconscious mind and your gut totally taking control over you and forcing you to eat this food. This is the phenomenon. These are laws. These are like physics, right? These are laws. When you have a restrained food that you secretly want, but you're not letting yourself have it, it's becoming very rare. You will have a break. You will uncontrollably have that food because it seems more valuable. Your brain has deemed that food valuable and it thinks you're starving. Your brain is trying to protect you. Your stomach is trying to keep you alive. And it sees this valuable food as something that it needs, and it's overpowering you. And that's why you binge. So to stop binging, we need to understand this rule. This law is in effect, okay? Like, we need to understand this law is in effect. Because very quickly, when we get into how to stop binge eating, people start to freak out. And that's what I want to talk to you about today is making you not freak out. Because here's the number one fear that people have. When they start hearing about stopping binge eating, they understand intuitively that they can't let themselves get hungry. But the thing about mental deprivation, right? So they understand, I gotta eat more. Like, I can't let myself starve. That's pretty basic, right? But the whole thing about deprivation, the mental and emotional deprivation, this starts to scare people because their mind goes, oh, wait, you're telling me I can have carbs, I can have pizza, I can have ice cream? Well, and then I just heard this today. And then people say, well, I won't stop eating. If I'm hungry, I won't stop eating. Or if I start, I won't stop. Or if I just let myself have what I wanted to, I'd only eat sweets. I'd only eat unhealthy. And does this come up for you? Like, when you think about allowing yourself to have some quote unquote bad foods, does it scare the bejesus out of you? Do you say, holy shit, if I have bad foods, I just keep eating them? If that's you, then you have a block, and I'm not here to judge. I just want to bring awareness to this block, because understanding why this block is there and how to get rid of this block is the key to stop binge eating. If you can stop binge eating, you can normalize your weight, and you can tune into your body more and eventually lose weight in the longer term. But first, you have to get over binge eating. And to get over binge eating, you have to understand why this mental deprivation is there, which is the rule I just explained. So basically what is happening, why you fear these foods is is you let's do the keto example, right? So you're on keto, you didn't eat carbs, you went into deprivation, the carbs became perceived as insanely valuable, and you uncontrollably ate carbs. Now, if you do not understand dieting and how dieting works and how deprivation works, especially emotional and mental deprivation, what happens is that you then conclude, you then develop a belief, you then develop an outlook that you need rules. So rules, like, so you feel uncontrollable, right? You feel chaotic, like you sense your body and stomach are overtaking you. And oftentimes during this, I don't know if you've ever seen like one of those videos in Africa where like an animal is eating another animal. And then the animal just goes dead after a while. Like I saw some, this is a little messed up, but it's coming to my mind right now. I saw some hyenas, like they tackled a gazelle and the gazelle was like, meh, meh, for a while. But then it was like, the gazelle was still moving, but it was like, it zoned out. It was being eaten alive, but it zoned out, right? So this other force, this other creature was eating it. And the gazelle was still alive, but it was zoned out. It was like not there anymore. It's not conscious. Like some other process had started taking over this gazelle. The gazelle is zoned out. That zoning out happens when your stomach takes over your willpower, when your subconscious mind overpowers you. It's like a zoned out. It's like you're not even there. You're disconnected. You're in shock. That's your body. That's like your brain shutting down and letting your body take over. So these are powerful forces you need to understand, right? So that happens with carbs. What happens incorrectly, what happens though, is that when you return to your body, you feel guilty. You then conclude, you then believe you need more rules. You need to try keto even more. You need to go even harder next time. And so you try again and you fail again. And you think that there's something wrong with you. You think that you are a strange, messed up little creature who's somehow totally just messed up, and that you are just a twisted, deprived being, totally shameful state, and you need carbs to, you need rules to manage carbs, because carbs, if you go around carbs, you're gonna flip out and you're going to go crazy. You have these experiences in your head, but here's the thing. These experiences are not actually true. So when we start to think about having carbs, you're gonna feel afraid. Okay, you're gonna feel afraid. You are, because for dozens of times you felt out of control around carbs, and you've concluded that carbs are these things that make you go batshit crazy, right? That's been your experience so far. And so you have this gut level fear, intrinsic, that carbs make you go crazy. But what you haven't seen the big picture. The big picture is that you had prevented yourself, you had restricted yourself, you had deprived yourself from carbs, and that this deprivation actually made these carbs seem insanely valuable, which then drove you to eat them out of control. All right? So the flip side of this whole thing is that if you allow yourself to have some carbs, what will happen? What will happen is this thing called habituation. Carbs don't taste that good when you can have them all the time. This is such a hard concept to understand for some people. Basically, the only way to shift into this mentality is to say, well, why not? I'll try it. I'll try eating some carbs. And I'll try to do it mindfully. And here's this beautiful thing that happens when people start incorporating their foods. And just a word of advice, if you're really, really scared of some foods, like let's say ice cream is your worst nightmare, you don't have to go to ice cream first. You can practice this thing and see that it works with easier foods. So let's say ice cream is like your number one binge food, and like we'll just stick with carbs. Let's say carbs are like maybe somewhat of a binge. You're not as afraid of eating carbs, but you're terrified of eating ice cream. You don't need to start off with ice cream. But what you do is instead of disconnecting, you use mindfulness. And I'm telling you, this is the key. You use mindfulness And if you can get this belief in you, like you can get this belief in you that if you can have carbs mindfully, basically whenever you want, if you can have carbs mindfully, that that will cure the deprivation, that will cure the cravings, and that will cure the heightened value of carbs. And if you if you get rid of the heightened value of carbs, then you won't binge on them. So right now the carbs, before, if you're depriving on carbs, they become scarce. And the scarcity drives up their value, and it drives your behavior to binge eat. And when you binge eat, you eat like 5, 10,000, 15,000 calories. It's impossible to lose weight. Your body cycles get all twisted up after that, right? So the solution then is, instead of to disconnect, it's to listen to your cravings for carbs. Do not disconnect. Do not disconnect. If you disconnect, this isn't going to work. But your job is to, what's it called? Your job is to eat these carbs mindfully. And when you eat these carbs, theoretically, I'm going to go theoretical, I'm going to go practical. Theoretically, what is happening is that you are no longer depriving yourself of these carbs, meaning that the scarcity is gone. And if scarcity is gone, that neuropeptide Y, it doesn't go in your brain for carbs. So the carbs are basically, it's just a piece of bread. And if you don't want that, if it's just a piece of bread, why would you binge on it? If it's just a piece of bread and you can have it whenever you want, then there's no panic that you'll never have it again. Remember that panic? That panic happens because you're internally telling yourself you're never going to have bread again, or pizza, or whatever it is. And that panic then makes that food very scarce and rare. We're taking away that panic by letting you have permission. This is emotional permission to have food. Now the key is to mindfully eat, because what you're going to do is discover that if you can really get emotional about this, right? This isn't like an intellectual thing, like, oh, I can have carbs, blah, 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 like it's in your head. This is in your heart, it's in your soul. If you can get this thing in your soul that I can have carbs or ice cream or whatever, whenever I want, and you actually give yourself to do it, what I'd recommend is eating after a meal, trying a little bit after a meal. You want to do it that way, just trust me. There's no guilt, no shame. It's just a curious attitude. You eat it mindfully, and you will discover this other woman the other day. She was eating a cupcake, and she'd always disconnected. She'd always disconnected from it, and she realized, holy crap, this frosting doesn't even taste good. Like, the only reason this was rare was because the only reason I liked these or thought I liked these or valued these was because I didn't let myself have them. They became special. But once they became normal, I didn't actually even want them. So, so when you're mindful and you're giving yourself permission to have these foods, you then avoid the deprivation cycle. Okay? So you avoid the deprivation cycle, and then you can normalize your eating patterns. If you normalize your eating patterns, you can listen to your body, you can listen to feedback, and basically, story for another video, but you can train yourself, you can get biofeedback and actually start craving nutritious foods. But you have to get over binge eating first. So you get over binge eating by getting rid of scarcity. You get rid of scarcity by eating the foods you secretly want. You eat them mindfully. Okay, you got to put weight loss on the back burner because some of these foods are unhealthy. All right, so if you're thinking in your head about all these rules that you can't have sugar or sweets, you got to put those rules away. And then as you start to gain trust that you'll stop eating. Trust me, you'll stop eating. Your body doesn't want to eat all these foods. It really doesn't. The only reason your body is eating these foods uncontrollably is because you're thinking that you can't have these foods. But if you really do believe that you can have these foods, your body won't want it. It's a beautiful paradox. And so that's the core about understanding binge eating. And I hope that you can understand that if you get rid of deprivation, you can then lead to you can then lead to stability in your body, which is basically you're attuned to your body. And if you're attuned to your body, you're going to start noticing that healthy foods taste better. But you can't notice that healthy foods taste better when you're binge eating. It just doesn't work that way. You need to get binge eating first and then move on to healthy foods. All right, that's today's video. Today's exercise is to, after you eat, like a meal, like get full, get nice and satisfied, take a food that you're scared of and just see what happens. Be mindful with it, right? Don't spend too much money. Don't spend too much money, but just get a food that you're scared of. Maybe it's like chips or something, and maybe get a bag. You're already pretty full, and sit down and eat it mindfully. Like just get out of your head. Notice how the chips taste. Maybe the first couple bites feel really good, but then, I don't know, maybe like 5, 6, 7, 8 bites later, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's 50 bites later, you start to realize, wow, I don't want these chips. You throw them away. And then you're over it. It might take a little bit longer if you've really deprived on chips for like years. It might take a week or two or something, to get over chips. But yeah, this is how you get over it. So that's the exercise. Let me know what you think. All right, peace.